we have a rule on Passover which begins tomorrow night, actually starting from late tomorrow morning, and as we get close to Passover, we're not allowed to eat anything which has chametz in it, and we're not even allowed to own anything which has chametz in it. The reason why we're here is because we can't own anything which has chametz in it. We don't need you to prevent us from eating it. We need you to prevent us from eating it. So we have lots of this stuff, and there are lots of people. There are many people who come to me and actually put themselves, and I'm sure to the rabbis as well, and they say, we don't really have any chametz. We work very hard to get rid of all of our chametz, but just in case, it's a custom, we want to sell the chametz. But many people don't. Many people leave a lot of chametz in their possession. Well, for whatever reason, they could have bought. Maybe they bought oatmeal in bulk. People keep yashon or things like that, and they really didn't use it all up. People could have whiskeys, all these different kinds of things which are chametz, contain chametz, and we cannot own them. So we want to sell them to you so that you will be the owner of them, an absolute sale. In that way, we are not in possession of chametz on Pesach. This includes, but is not limited to, foods, beverages, and medicines that are pure chametz, fermented grains such as breads or grain alcohol, those that contain an amount of chametz mixed with other ingredients. So the first things would be breads and pastas and cookies and cakes, and we put liquor on that list, as well as amounts of chametz mixed with other ingredients. So what's our favorite example of that? Carolyn, remember from the past? Was, for example, mustard, or something like that. Ketchup, ketchup, mayonnaise. These things where there's vinegar, which is in the mix, and that vinegar would be oftentimes grain vinegar that's in there. So it's mostly tomato paste, but at the same time there's chametz which is mixed in, and we don't want to own that either. Or even those that are only possibly chametz. Now you don't know that we don't know that the ketchup is chametz. A lot of the vinegar which is used in food production doesn't come from grain. So the people will still throw it in unless it's certified for Passover, as well as chametz nuksha. Chametz nuksha is chametz which is not really so edible at this point in time. It is hardened. It is not easily potable. We still try to be careful not to own such chametz in our possession. All these categories are included whether they are suitable for human consumption or for the consumption of any living thing. We say chametz, and I know you will appreciate this especially, but it's considered a problem if it's called in Hebrew ro'ui la'achilas kelev, which means if it's suitable that a dog would even eat it. Okay, now Carolyn used to be my next door neighbor, and they have a whole big, nice collection. We still have, how many do you have? How many is? 0. Oh no.
Just died.
I'm sorry?
Just died.
Yeah. I'm sorry. We used to have a few.
Oh, total. I have had 5 over the years, and sometimes 3 at a time. 2 at a time and one, and
Right.
just died.
And when we lived next door, it was 3.
Yeah.
Yes. I used to say it was a rough neighborhood. So whether they are on their premises or elsewhere, okay, people own chametz sometimes that they don't have in their house. Whether it's people who say, I left something in a cabinet at the office, whether it's people who say, I have something, somebody just sent me an email this morning, they asked me, they said they ordered something, and they were expecting it to come, and it didn't come yet. And with their luck, it's going to show up on Pesach. What do they do? So they want to include such a thing in the sale whenever it comes, whether they are theirs or belonging to another Jew and placed in their trust. This is also a common situation, especially around now, because a lot of people today's sale, a lot of people who are leaving for Pesach, so their neighbor comes over to them and says, could you do me a favor? I have ketchup and it's open, and I have a bunch of things. Could I put stuff in your fridge? That's what a lot of people do that. They want their fridge to be free of chametz. They put it in with one of these people. So sometimes they sell it and say, I sold it, but it's at somebody else's house, so it's not on their premises. Sometimes they say, I'm giving it to you to hold, and then they sell it on their behalf. So whatever it is, whatever chametz they have connection to, if it's on their premises or if it belongs to somebody else and they're responsible for it, they're in trouble. So they have to sell it. And the sale is complete and unconditional. And from this point, by virtue of this contract, all of the above shall be considered the property of Carolyn Everly without any stated or implied liabilities or responsibilities upon the sellers. Okay, so this is a very important line in the document, and that is that even though the stuff that we're doing here has a lot of value, and you're going to give us today a down payment and not full payment for everything, but we want the sale to be absolutely final as of today. And that's because people can't own it. And if we're going to have issues with payment at some point later, we want those issues to be separate and apart from the sale. The sale is done, and any issues which we have, we'll have to resolve between us. We'll have to figure out, but it's a separate issue. The sale will go ahead complete and unconditional. Is that understood? Okay, the other thing is, we want to have no responsibility. Now you're going to become the owner of all of this chametz, and it's at my address, and it's at this person's address and that person's address. If something happens, let's say a person has a freezer full of bread that they sell to you, and I hear that we're expecting some snow, and I think if there's a high risk if more than 6 snowflakes fall, we could be out of power for weeks, right? And the freezer could conk out, and the bread could get spoiled. But we're selling the bread to you, and it has a value, and you're going to have to pay for it. And then if something goes wrong with it, we don't want to be responsible for it. You see, the trick is that if we not only own our own chametz, but if we have somebody else's chametz that we are responsible for, it's also an issue for us on Pesach. Right? We don't want that. So therefore, we're asking you to accept responsibility for that. That's the one risk that I told you undertake in this transaction. If something goes wrong. Now, people might say, as I always tell you, they say, look, Carolyn was trying to do us a favor, so I'm not going to make her pay me the balance that she owes me, but I can't guarantee that, right? Okay, so that's your liability. I also am renting to Carolyn on their behalf from now and through Friday, April 5th, any utensils that have been used for chametz as mentioned above and have not been rendered fit for Pesach use, and I'm selling to her any bits or residue of chametz that remain adhering to these utensils. Now, technically speaking, we can own chametz dishes on Pesach. Chametz dishes means any dish which was used during the year for chametz. We can own them. However, the one thing that we do have to worry about is that if there's chametz which is stuck to them, that's a problem. And sometimes people don't have the time with all the Passover preparations to do what the halacha requires us, Jewish law would purely require us to do, which is to take each of those dishes and to make sure to inspect them or scour them to make sure that there's no chametz stuck to them. So therefore, while people are doing that to many of their dishes, because many of them they are making kosher for Passover through a process which involves cleaning and then something else, but for those who are not, so we want to give you those dishes. So lots of those people, for example, who came and said, I don't have any chametz, but they said, but I didn't have time to go through all my cabinets and scour the dishes in the cabinets, so I'm closing all the cabinets, and that way you'll rent the dishes to Carolyn. We're not selling them to you. We don't want to sell them to you, because when a Jew buys dishes, there's all kinds of things he's got to do with those dishes, so we don't want to sell them to you. We want to rent them to you. But by you becoming in possession of the dishes, any chametz, what we call hadavuk bekelim, any chametz which is attached to that, is yours. Okay? That's also part of the deal. Additionally, I am renting to chametz on their behalf from now until Friday, April 5th. Any part of the premises they own or rent where anything considered chametz as mentioned above is being kept. We do not want even your chametz to be in our possession. As we said before, when somebody else's chametz is in our possession, we could still have liability in some way, and that would also be an issue. We don't want to have any chametz of yours in our possession, and therefore, we're going to rent you the actual spaces. If you'll notice, on the front of this document, where we have areas where chametz is stored. Now many of these say entire house, maybe entire house except master bedroom, entire apartment, because again, lots of these people are just far away for Yontif, so they're not there at all. Other people who are there for Yontif, especially tomorrow, it'll say kitchen cabinets, pantry and basement, freezer, area and freezer. We're renting you those spaces, so that way the chametz, while it's at the address that we live at, but that area of the house is considered yours. So the chametz is yours, and the area in which it is found is yours as well. And when it's yours, I mean that this rental will allow you to use said property to store anything you wish. An allowance will be made for giving the renter access to said property. We're not just renting it to you for the purpose of holding chametz. I can't do that. I have to rent it to you so you can do with it whatever you want. So if you want to come to my house and say, do me a favor, I'd like to have that chametz which I sold you, and I would like to store some stuff of mine for safekeeping in that closet. Absolutely, you have every right to do that. And we have access, every document that says access, and I have a code here for how you're able to access the property. Sometimes, like this one, it says it's so-and-so who lives at 2705 such and such a street, and access it says the name of the neighbor who lives at 2801 that street. Sometimes it says address in a completely different place. Sometimes it says Rabbi. In any case, if you need the access, I can decipher this, and I can tell you exactly how. Everybody, there's a solution. I have a bag like this, it grows every year, of keys in my drawer. I'm sure you also have of keys in my drawer from people who say, I'm going to be away, I don't have a key with my neighbor, but here, you take a key. And I think one of those people once asked for the key back. So we have a nice collection. So that's that. Now, together with obtaining the rental rights of these properties, Karen Leverly also becomes the owner of the items listed above. Okay, so now, and this I say for you, and I say also for the edification of the people who are here to watch and to learn, one of the big things here is making what we call a masa kinyan. We have to do something that you should become the owner of it. If you want to buy a jar of ketchup or a loaf of bread, you go to the store. You walk in, you pick up the loaf of bread, you pick up the jar of mayonnaise, you go to the cashier, you pay money, and you walk out with it in your bag. And you're the owner. Nobody has any question about that. Here we are, we're sitting in a conference room, and we're deciding about a jar of ketchup that's on Williamson Avenue, and a half-finished bottle of scotch that's on Cross Country Boulevard. How are you becoming the owner of all of this? That's one of the big challenges. How do you do that? So we will be doing a whole number of separate procedures that could work in order to make you the owner. Here we allude to numbers 1 and 2. Number 1 is what we call kinyan chotzer, that when you own an area, when you take ownership of an area, so if there are things inside that area, or if you own the area from before, something is put in that area with permission for you to take ownership for it, the fact that it's in your property makes it that you can become the owner. That's called kinyan chotzer. So since we're renting to you these pantries, these apartments, these houses, you can become the owner of anything inside of it which the owner wants to give to you. That's method number 1. We'll still have to complete the transaction for the rental, but that's one thing which we're alluding to here. The other one is something called kinyan agav. Kinyan agav is, in English we would probably say, piggyback, which means that if you become owner of a piece of real estate, so we can piggyback on a real estate transaction, the sale of movable items. So it's very normal to sit in a conference room and write a contract to conclude a sale on a piece of real estate. It's not normal to do it for a bottle of ketchup. But when you sit in a conference room and you do a transaction for a piece of real estate, and the person says, well, you're buying the house, included in the house, I'm also going to give you the lawn chairs. I'm also going to give you the barbecue grill. I'm also going to give you this thing, that thing, the other thing. You're able to do that because we say when you have such a significant transaction for real estate, you can attach to it other things, piggyback. So we're piggybacking on this real estate transaction, the sale of chametz as well. Those are methods 1 and 2. That, you understand? I mean, you know, I'm reviewing this. I know, like you might say, why does he do this to me every year? But we have witnesses, and I'm going to ask people here to act as witnesses on the transaction as we close it. So we need your help. Okay. We need to everything to be very clear. Carolyn grants permission to the current occupants to enter said properties as they wish and allows the sellers to take any items included in the sale without invalidating the sale. Okay, so this is also very important. One of the messages I picked up when I came in was from a gentleman who actually just came this morning to make me the agent, and he's on this list. And he doesn't live in his house anymore. He's an elderly person, and he lives with his daughter, generally speaking, and especially for Passover. So he lives with his daughter. So I said, so you want me to sell the whole house because you're not cleaning the whole house for Passover? He said, yes, I would like you to do that. So it's included in here. So he just left me a message before, and he said, Rabbi Hauer, I might need to make an amendment. Why? Because I didn't realize that it's the end of March, and April 15th is coming, and I might need to go into my house to get some paperwork for my financials for taxes somewhere along the line. Is that going to be okay? Do I have to make an amendment? So that's just one example of many. Many times people sell and they I have to go. It's cold. I was expecting it to be springtime and I didn't pack the right clothing, or I was expecting it to be a blizzard and suddenly the weather changed. Can I go in? So is it okay if people go into the property? Okay. If people take something, let's say one of these people who sells the chametz now, let's say they're actually not leaving right away, and they go and they take something. So here, what we call it, this is what's called basically what we're dealing now with is in the area of Jewish law called Orach Chaim, section of Jewish law which deals with festivals and other such things. But we're also dealing with monetary law. If somebody goes in and takes it now, they're not doing anything wrong with the laws of Passover, but they might be stealing from you because you bought it, and you're supposed to pay for it. But if somebody goes and takes it, are you okay if it's yours? But if they take it for themselves later, you're okay. You won't consider it stealing. Okay, that's important. I always have to ask that because it comes up all the time in many different ways. Okay. It is understood that should any elements of the sale be considered for any reason invalid, any other elements of the sale shall remain valid. So, for example, just a moment ago, Rabbi Bloch from South Africa, right? I got the name right? Huh?
Not Rabbi, Robert.
Robert, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you said Rabbi. So Robert Bloch from South Africa said he sold his chametz with the people there in South Africa, but he's worried that maybe it won't work, so he wants to sell it with me too. So either it's going to work with them and it's not going to work with me, it's going to work with me and it's not going to work with them, right? Two people aren't going to own the chametz. So if there are lines like that on this document of people who maybe the sale isn't invalid, I don't want us to say batla miktsasa batla kula, which means if a piece is invalid, then it invalidates the whole thing. Okay, so each one should be discrete and should stand on its merits. I've received from Carolyn. Okay, so now we go to further kinyanim, to further acts of transaction. I'm going to ask Carolyn to give me $1 for each of these shtaros, for each of these documents. None of them has more than 20 people. The dollar would mean that for each one it's at least a nickel, which is a minimum amount to make the sale go through. I have, again, 8 documents, so I'm going to need a total of $8 as the price of rental for the properties and utensils. That's for what we call the schius, the rental. Now, for the sale itself, we don't know the value of the chametz. We don't have estimates. Maybe some people wrote down estimates, people came with estimates. We don't trust the estimates because nobody knows how much a half-open bottle of ketchup is really worth. So people can really overestimate the price. So we need to agree to submit to the opinion of 3 knowledgeable appraisers. And pursuant to their estimate, you'll pay the full amount less 5% as a discount for the favor. And from this point, it's your debt. In other words, whatever that value ends up being, you owe us. You owe us, minus 5%. We don't know exactly what the value is. So you're going to pay me by a down payment, and that'll be the sale. We've made clear that the sale at this point is complete and final, and should not be nullified by any non-payment of the balance. So for each document, you're going to give me $1 for the rentals, and $1 towards the sale. and the balance shall be due on Friday, April 5th, 2013. I just will mention, just as a historical note so people could know, that Carolyn has been doing this kindness for us for several years. How many years now are you doing it? 5 years, 6 years, something like that? 5 or 6 years Carolyn has been doing it. And what happened in previous years was that I